dotted with additional courses and programs and so on, and specific to the actual company and such, and they'll be delivered like this. I have a series of SAP lectures coming up, and they'll be given by SAP experts, and it's all log on and webinars and so on. That's how I've been operating for the last, maybe 6, 7, 8 years. In terms of learning stuff for myself, really. But so and it works. It works fine. So there's some nice new tricks and technologies that I'd like to be able to use, but I don't have them available to me yet. But in time they'll all come, and it's just different platforms and so on. So that's the background of where things are going. So it's the to use a horrendous expression, the new norm. Hate that fucking expression. The media are great at coming up with all these phrases and expressions. Anyway, let's get down to brass tacks. We don't have too many slides this morning. You'll be delighted to know. But I just want to finish out this section, and that finishes me with, or finishes you with. I just double check. Is it am I on track? Um, yeah, pretty much. What are we on now? We're on this one, number 4. I'm just double checking my 14. That's so checking. Yeah, yeah, we'll be pretty much. Well, we're ahead. We're actually slightly ahead of where we need to be. Right, so folks, so we were looking yesterday at this again. We're talking about the software, and topical subject, um, and our strategies. So if we want to build our relationships, we're looking at the supply chain planning and business intelligence, and then automatic identification tools. These are the RFID type technologies, barcoding, optical technologies. When in production, I'm always fascinated with the speed at which some of these systems operate, where they're using cameras to identify the different products coming along on a production belt or something like that. And particularly anything that's slightly flawed, how the cameras are so quick to be able to pick up on quality and so on in real time. It's just the speed of this stuff. So these automatic identification tools, um, they're used obviously in production, also in marketing. Some companies use cameras to watch and study the behavior of their customers and feed that back into production and so on, for example. What else? And then we have the customer relationship side of it, and then up at the top we have the enterprise resource planning. So, for all intents and purposes, if you look at that, okay, I wonder what. Right, I'm feeling generous now this morning. Um, for 15%, okay, for 15%, are you open it? Oh, hang on a sec. I live in the middle of no. Sorry. Oh no, no problem at all. I know. Jesus, just as well. I checked the messages and getting mixes of private and public messages. Um, no, absolutely no problem at all. I fully understand, and that makes absolute sense. And yeah, between repairs and broadbands and so on and so forth. Absolutely fine. The people know who I'm talking to when it is. So it's no, it's perfectly fine. And uh, yeah, but look, we're fine. We're perfect. Everything is working fine. Right. I was going to give away 15%. Um, and if you're looking at the diagram on your screen right now, what other business model or concept could look like this, could be represented by this, a generic model? Now, you'll have to type your message or type your answer to me. So for 50, I better take note of this because I'm off the man for forgetting Oh no, you'll be sending me an email. So for 15%, what other generic business model or concept does this represent? Or is quite similar to this? I'll give you a couple of I'll give you a few seconds to have a think about that. I'm just going to what am I going to do? I'm turning off my camera for a minute. You can still hear me.
Yeah, Mark, we can still hear you.
No, it's not business plan, not Amazon model. No, I'm looking for something, a more generic model that you would have all studied at some point. I'm quite sure there are similarities. It's not identical. Um, no, not four P's. Okay, Kira, you've got it. You've nailed it. A SWOT. Mm. Kira, send me an email, will you, with your student number and also mention this 15%. Now I'll come back on. Yep. SWOT, that's it. That's what I was looking for. I did say that there weren't easy questions, but at the same time, if you think outside the box, literally, the SWOT box, you can see. So, I mean, if you look at it there, you have, if you could look at the internals, the strengths and weaknesses, the supply chain planning and the supply chain execution, and externally business intelligence and event management, and you're kind of overlaying into the customer relationship side of things externally, and supplier side of things will be external, and the enterprise resource planning and identification could be classified as internal. There's a little bit of a mix there, but generally speaking, yeah, you're looking at a SWOT. So you can see that how these people are just thinking about existing models and so on for rebranding them or recategorizing them and coming up with a variation of the model itself. And that's why you have this one here. So if we look at this, the supply chain planning on for software, generally speaking, now historically everything has started in this area back up here, right down to this side of it here. Materials requirements planning one, then MRP two, and so on. And eventually we moved into building these. Right now, this is one of the hot areas in uh, the software world for businesses as such, and they have their own module in SAP, as I mentioned before. It's called or yesterday, it's called SAP BI, which is the business modeling. Now, event management down here, that's an interesting one. This is all events inside are anything that impacts on your supply chain. So looking at ways of dynamically changing your distribution systems, your transportation management systems, and so on, so on. And having the um, and this is going to be um, this is going to be a really powerful growth area with enabled by this 5G technology when it starts rolling out more effectively. Why? Because you'll have Internet of Things. The amounts of data that's going to be collected is just going to be just phenomenal. Come on, come into me. Here you are. That's it there. So, supply chain planning applications help organizations shift from autonomous planning activities to synchronized planning processes that use real time data for collaboration across departments, suppliers, and customers. So, available and capable to promise, so identifying your products, all part our availability of stock, sales and operations, so planning and integrated business planning. Um, that one is a little bit disguised. By that I mean sales and operations. If you look at it from the sales and marketing function inside the organization and the operations function, I have to try and stay in camera. The operations function inside an organization. It's how these two departments fundamentally interact together, and that's really really important. The exchange of information, in other words. And I've been saying it so many times now that sales and marketing identify what products and shifts in demand, changes in demand, and feeding back to operations such that they can plan and produce the products as required and so on. And but that is it sound I'm making it sound overly simple. It is a really difficult and challenging part of the organization, because it has to respond, and how quickly the organizations respond to the external impacts. And that's extremely important here, in terms of planning and integration between your functions. Collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment, which is a direct fallout from the above. Event planning, promotions, and life cycles. So, again, the events I just saw in the previous one, you can be internally controlling the events. But for example, a promotion might be, for this weekend, we're taking 10% off the price of our products, or at the end of the month, we're going to sell two for one or three for the price of two. If you've ever shopped in Boots, for example, you'll see an awful lot of product, buy two and get the third one free and all this sort of stuff, which is really interesting. I mean, it isn't a case of buy one and get one free, you'll get some of that, but buying two and getting a third one free and so on, or getting reduced prices. They're running these promotions all the time. And people being people believe they're getting a great deal as such. And in actual fact, they're not. They might be getting a little bit of a deal, but the prices are structured that do you think the company is going to lose money by giving one away free? Absolutely not. It's they're shifting quantity. They might be taking a little bit of a. They might be selling the third one at cost price, and the other two they still have their profits. And remember, if let me see, if you take any product inside in Boots, they're buying the company value of the product is about 20%. The wholesaler can be about between 30 and 40%, and the profit can be between 30 and 40% on it. So the actual manufacturer's price, on average, can be as little as or in around the 20% mark. The other two, 40%. That's how much markup goes on to putting stuff into warehouses, wholesalers, distributors, and then the retailers by the time the customer, pays the final price. So if they decide, if the manufacturers decide, well, we'll offer ours with three for the price of two, then that's a promotion, and they have to have the product there. So what's the point of going down and not have enough product, or being sold out in the first couple of hours or couple of days? So they have to plan and produce, and everything in their whole supply chain changes because of these promotions, and for how long they last. They could be there for a week, could be there for a month, and it might be just one day. It depends on the scenario. So that kind of level, and the other side of it, they're the promotion side of it, and they're happening all the time. Why? Because uh, you understand the psychology of and behavior of purchasers. Anytime they think they're getting a deal, they'll spend more money, and that's why you have constant. I mean, you're in the middle of summer, you're seeing winter sales, crying out loud, and price reductions. There's always discounts in certain shops around Dublin. You'll see, sale on, sale on. There seems to be permanently a sale on inside the organisation. Then you have the Black Fridays, or now what do they call it? They're extending into Black Friday is a week long now, and all this sort of stuff. And if you're on Amazon Prime, you had last week, I said, you had Amazon Prime 2 days, of reduced deals and so on and so forth. So they're constantly running, and the idea is that people are influenced very heavily by these promotions and deals as such, and they will spend a little bit more. Um, we were looking at something. We needed to get a rug from literally from IKEA, and the rug was, I think it was something like 125 euros or 150 euros or something like that. IKEA is less than 20 kilometers away from me here, and a pretty straightforward drive. They wanted 50 euros to deliver it. No, so I said, forget it. We drive over and get it, a couple of hours over and back. But the point, they don't have, well, they do have promotions every so often and internally, and they put it all to the front. And people say, "Oh, this is great." So it catches our eyes. We think we're getting a deal, and therefore we jump at it all the time. And we'll certainly think twice when if you're in shops and booths. Much and all as I talk and talk on about it, it's behavior. You're being conditioned. So the company knows that if they put these promotions in place, people will see them, and they know on past data that if 100 customers see this promotion, probably 70% of them will take it up, or maybe 50%. And they'll have done their calculations. Well, if 50% of people take this, go for these promotions based on past, then we don't need to have 100% of stock and turnaround. We only need to have maybe 60% and have a little bit of headroom, such that if 50% goes up to 60%, then we have additional stock available for people to be able to purchase the promotions. And if they find that, oh, it's only 50%, it's dropped down to 40%, then they might extend the promotion just to get rid of that stock and then level off again back to the normal productions as such. And so these are all carefully planned. These aren't charities. You can be absolutely sure of it. Then the other side of the flip side of the promotions are these life cycles. Um, so stuff that's going out of date. The companies already know about new models coming out, or new features, or new versions of their products. So they begin to drop prices of their current products just to get rid of them, to sell them off as such. That happens in quite a lot of virtually all our products. If you went looking now for an Apple iPhone 6 or 7, you get them at a fraction of the price that they were originally came on the market for. But would you want to do that? Probably not. But there would be customers that would want to take a deal like that and pick up things that have gone out. I mean, here a rule of thumb. Um, and a bit of advice: never buy a brand new car straight out of a garage. Never, ever do it. I know people say that's awful advice, Mark, but it's fact. Wait a year, maybe wait 2 years. You'll get the same car with much reduced price. Depreciation, they tell you, and so on and so forth. It's just new models coming out. I think once in my lifetime, I actually bought a car straight from a showroom. And I always remember a relative of mine, and he literally said it to me, he said, "I'll wait a year or two," he said, "and I'll get it for maybe 60% of the price that you paid for it." He was freaking well right, the way the price had dropped down and so on, because you're going to buy the car and you're going to be worried about the first scratch in the car, and then that happens and you're going to get really pissed off, and then so on, so on, so on. So yeah, unless you're really into showmanship and you want to have the latest model of a car out on the road, happy days, off you go. But best advice: wait for a year or two to buy that particular model of car, and you'll save some money. In actual fact, the money you'll save will probably pay for a vacation. Anyway, moving on. So that's the product life cycle. So things need to be moved and shifted on, because companies need to make space for the new products and so on. So the life cycle will determine how quickly they can get rid of it and reduce the price and move it on. And then you have as I call it, the enforced life cycle. So again, we track this and we say, well, they enforce it. So we can see the number of customers using this, and the level of support that's needed has been dropping, dropping, dropping. Therefore, we say, that's it, no more, end of life for this product. Now, if you want to upgrade, you must buy this new version of the product, because it's not. And we're even seeing now that companies are not building in backwards compatibility, that you have to take the new version because it won't work with old versions and all this. So, and I don't particularly like that, but unfortunately, that's the way companies are beginning to behave. In the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, almost every product came out was backwards compatible. In other words, that if you bought a computer, older software would work on it just as well as the newer one. But now, what I'm noticing is that as the life cycle of computers have changed, and we've gone pretty much into nearly all 64-bit processors, even though we still have 32-bit programming there, you will find that certain software that's been released now will only work with the newer machines, 64-bit machines, and not with the older ones. And the way around that is, say, look at your system requirements, or your system. Will the requirements of the new software is this, and this. Otherwise, it won't work, or probably would be extremely slow. But most times now it won't working. So they're forcing you to move on to the next version and next version and so on. And so it's a managed type of approach. Is it wrong? Ethically wrong? It's hard to say. But again, consumer behavior. We always try to get the latest and greatest and on most recent versions of products and so on. So the companies know this. The other side of it is you notice on product life cycles that they're managed very carefully. Apple would not introduce an iPhone every 3 months. Even if they could, they wouldn't do it. They try to get as much out of the first version. So it's almost happening on an annual basis, 2 years, 1 year kind of time frame before next models come out. Across all the manufacturers of these products, and but again, because they're managing the life cycle and they need to hold on to their market share, it's a balancing act. And then, of course, if we look down at supply chain, demand, supply, and inventory planning, these are all obviously based on your MRP elements of your SAP system, for example. And then production and multi-plant capacity planning. And this is where it starts to get interesting. So you can now see across different sites, and I mentioned to you before about HP had this great setup where they had three main manufacturing plants. One was Ireland, one in the States, and where was the other one? Oh God, I'm not sure. I need to check. My wife worked with them, and I can never remember the third site. But they had what was known as swing sites. So, for example, and these were the printer manufacturing and print heads. And when for example, if they were introducing a new series of printers in the US and they needed additional production, they'd come to Ireland, or they'd say to Ireland, you need to ramp up production of this particular model because they'd have identical production facilities. So it was like I joke about it. It's like whack-a-mole. Every time something comes up, they'd increase the production in one area, and the other place would drop down to normal productions. And or if one came up, then the second one came up, and all this sorts. So the whole idea was that they were known as swing sites. So the production was swing a little bit to Ireland to swing their productions up to help cope with the demand in the US market. And then the US market, once that stabilized, they dropped back in production, and then they launched the products in Europe. So the US might have to be a swing site, the backing up the Irish operation and maybe the Indian operation. I think it was India, could be wrong. All three plants to service the European market, and they'd probably do it in that order: US, Europe, and then the Far East kind of thing. But again, multi-plant, and you have that all over the place, and and they were just three sites, but you can have multiple sites depending on the product and the industry as such. And then production, factory planning, and scheduling, that's purely internally, not altogether 100% true, because you might be offloading or you might be using contract manufacturers, and therefore you need to be able to balance their systems and say, well, if you're subcontracted to your contract manufacturer, his is he has to produce, we say, 1,000 units a week. That might be all that he'll produce, but that might free you up to say, well, I need to be able to produce 3,000 units per week. I can produce anywhere between 1,500 minimum and 3,500 maximum in my site. I'll offload to a contract manager. He produces 1,000. Therefore, it gives me room maybe to invest into a new product range and so on and so forth. So you have to be able to manage. So you become a far more flexible production site because you have a guaranteed 1,000 units being made by your contract manufacturer. They may be able to make more, but that's a new contract negotiation and so on. If you want to do that, it can be a little bit costly, but if you put all the bits and pieces in place, it'll be far more efficient, and you will actually save more money, and it gives you a bit more freedom, obviously, in your production plan. Vendor managed inventory, direct point of sales. This is purely the way of describing the pull system. So vendor managed inventory. It's based on pure pull. the point of sales at the retailer, they're the vendors selling to their customers. So they give you all the information back from their point of sale. So all these shops are going to hear the blip, blip, blip. All that information is on the database. They'll send it all back to you and so on and so forth. Strategic network design in terms of the network of your supply chain itself. Are in some countries you might be using a direct sales approach. In other countries you might be using distributors or partners or merchandisers or what's the other one, franchisers and so on. Or you might be partnering with other existing companies. Where was it? There are a number of European countries, but I do know in Turkey, I think it was, if you wanted to set up an operation in Turkey, you had to have either a local company or local management as part of your structure, or you had there was a legal requirement there anyway, and I think it's common enough, those kind of expectations or requirements, that you just can't go in and say Mark Cashin's company now is setting up in Turkey or in other European countries. Turkey, I'd actually have to say I'm working with some person there. I'm my local agent. He's going to be the manager of this company in Turkey and so on. That kind of structure it's common enough. So again, setting up these networks, across your market and focusing on and knowing which countries are growing more than others in terms of potential sales, that will determine your network as well. So all of this is driven by, again, your market research and business intelligence and so on. And then your inventory strategy optimization. That's pretty much a fallout from all of the above. If you start putting your planning in place, you have your capacities and so on, then you can start managing your inventory. So how close can I get to a just-in-time inventory management system or process which optimizes the reduction of inventory, warehouse costs, and all that. So you keep fine tuning that, and sometimes you might get a little bit too close and have a bit of a scare. So you put all this information back together and say, well, I need to have stuff coming in within 15 minutes, within 19 minutes, whatever the case may be, of absolute need in the production. I need these quantities and so on. So we look here then the execution applications. Companies deploy a variety of execution software to facilitate this. So warehouse management systems. And I won't need to describe each and every element within these, but obviously warehouse management they have people, inventory, returns management, part of your reverse logistics, and order processing, picking the items and so on. And whether you have automation and or physical people in the picking system. Forget the name of this company over in the UK. They do shopping. It's like your Tesco home shopping delivery system. Geez, I can see them. They're green vans and green bags. God Almighty! And it's an Indian guy that runs it. One absolutely huge warehouse. Anyway, his system has a picking system of all these different groceries and products inside in their warehouse, and it goes into the trays, literally, like your trays you'd have in at their security control above up in Dublin Airport. These little trays you put the stuff in and goes through those kind of trays, and they're put in bags. So people pick the physical